Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. This is Mr. Dion Brown, licensed clinical professional counselor, licensed clinical addictions counselor, and certified in trauma. I want to welcome you all to another episode of an integrated approach where we discuss issues every first Sunday at 6 p.m. related to and connected to mental health and wellness while incorporating spirituality. Typically, we will discuss these things and issues primarily from a Judeo Christian perspective. However, we are going to be respectful and acknowledge other types of spirituality and religious frameworks as well that our listening audience may be connected to. If you're online, we're going to ask for you to share this video, like, and encourage someone else to join in. So, we are delighted tonight that we're going to be looking at a subject that is trending sometimes, a very, very critical, important subject, and that is the subject concerning faith and mental health, faith and mental health, faith and mental health. Oftentimes, people talk about the two as if they're completely polar opposite and separate, as well as, we have dialogue and discussions that are going on talking about what that looks like in an integrated approach. Now, without further ado, what I'm going to do, we have a very special guest with us tonight. I'm going to bring him on so that he can come on and talk with us about this subject. Those of you that are viewing live through Facebook, and you'll hear me say this periodically, you'll be able to ask questions, give some input, as well as those of you that are looking on YouTube, you'll be able to see the video on DMV therapists, as well as be able to share it at some time in the future. So, without further ado, we're going to bring on Mr. Rashad Bowtie Mills himself. Hello, sir.
How are you, my dear friend?
I am doing well, sir. How are you today?
I'm exceptional. I am exceptional. No need to complain. And as the elders would say, Dion, if I could, who would listen?
Absolutely, absolutely. But we are elated to have you with us tonight to talk about this very important subject related to faith and mental health. So we're definitely going to. There's a lot to dialogue about concerning that, and a lot to unpack. But before we get started tonight, going down that path, why don't you share with our listening audience, those that are tuning in through Facebook, those that are tuning in through YouTube, or even Instagram, if you could share with us, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us a little bit about yourself, please. A little bit about yourself, who you are, your interests, your background, etc.
Sure. First and foremost, thank you so much, Dion, for having me on. I certainly appreciate the opportunity. So, as you stated, Rashad Bowtie Mills, I don't have on my signature bow tie piece today. Licensed clinical professional counselor. And I said that because we're in this, I guess we can say, this therapeutic framework tonight, talking about faith and mental health. And more importantly, for any title, I'm a child of God. I mean, that's who I am in my core, child of God, licensed clinical professional counselor, father of two amazing twins. And I'm an individual that loves the intersectionality of faith and mental health because my life has been greatly impacted by both of those. So I'm really, again, blessed to be able to share, how we can sort of merge the two and throw around different ideas, topics, and delve into it a little bit further.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate that. Again, we want to really just thank you and celebrate you for coming on to talk with us about that. So, all right. So, like I said, we're going to be delving into discussion concerning faith and mental health. Faith and mental health. So, for a long time, uh, particularly in our particularly in our churches, I think in a Christian perspective, um, faith, the notion of faith or belief in God and mental health have been deemed and looked at pretty separate
Mhm.
or at odds with each other in various ways. Um, and I have some thoughts about that, but I guess first let me ask you, I guess historically, right? If we go back a little bit, if we go back a little bit, what are your thoughts about the why? Maybe some of the whys, why, why this has been the case as far as, there's been maybe even a battle or a fight in the
Mhm.
past between faith and mental health. What are your thoughts about the why?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the why really breaks down from this perspective. I think that we've always thought that we've had to have one and or the other, that we
Mm,
could have both. And so let's think about it from the beginning of time. If we have believed that, hey, you know what, I have faith in God, so I don't need this other component that can help me as it relates to mental health, then they have to be polar opposites. In actuality, they were never meant to be separate to begin with, right? So when we think about the book that governs our lives, governs your life, governs my life, known as the Bible, there are instances of mental health right within the Bible.
mm.
So
Uh-oh.
if there are instances of mental health within the Bible, why do we have to separate the two? And again, I think that that's always been the thought that they had to be separate. So growing up, Dion, I remember growing up in the church Gillis Memorial in the west side of Baltimore. I can't remember as a child ever hearing of anything mental health related. Can't remember ever hearing anything mental health related. And why? Maybe there was this thought that we need to pray away all of these different things, all of the challenges, all of the anxieties, all of the depressive like symptoms that an individual may have. Let's just pray those out. And so I've never heard of mental health growing up. I mean, literally, particularly in the church, I've never heard of it. Even as a young guy growing up in Baltimore, I've heard mental health, but I've always heard it from this perspective. If it was like a negative thing, oh, that person must be this, or that person must be that, and it was said sort of in a tongue-in-cheek type manner, and so they were always separate, right? We always kept them separate, but in actuality, they never had to be that way. I think we have done a disservice in keeping them separate, and I think here's the other thing to answer the question as it relates to the why. I think it was a lack of knowledge.
Yep.
I think it was a lack of knowledge that, particularly in communities of color, that, hey, you know what? I can have a faith based perspective in addition to having mental health services to help me. So I think it's a combination of those two that have led us to, hey, they have to be like this as opposed to them actually being merged together.
Absolutely. And I think historically, one of the things that's happened, and I talk about this whenever I do talks and presentations for churches and church leaders, there's been what I like to call historical fallacies, right? Historical
Yep.
fallacies concerning belief systems. So historically in a lot of church and religious settings, we've tended to really demonize a lot of things in people, right?
Mhm.
Things that we don't understand and we don't have good clarity toward. We've out of our, and I get it to a degree, maybe out of our spiritual orientation, because whether, wherever you identify concerning your spirituality, your religious belief system, your foundation, we all have belief systems that are considered a norm, right? For our
Mhm.
religious culture. That's important with cross cultural counseling and therapy. We all have a norm, and what had unfortunately happened in the past was the dismissing or minimizing even for people in our church settings who suffered with depressive
Mhm.
symptoms, anxiety symptoms, as well as any other symptoms. We were quick historically to demonize them and just maybe try to throw a spiritual blanket over them, right?
Mhm.
To minimize what was going on. The good thing is that now, in this particular time in history, we know better, so we do better. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely seeing a emergence in our spiritual and religious foundations of God's people who are both clinicians and clergy, or clinician and leader, or clinician and laity, right? So we're having more churches and more pastors, you know, being educated and getting insight into the world of mental health and wellness, which is awesome. Are you seeing a turn with that too?
Absolutely. I think that it's unavoidable, right? It's unavoidable right now in present day that we have to have this intersectionality of faith and mental health, because there's too much information from the mental health world that we know that lets us know that everything can't be treated from a faith-based perspective, right? You can have the faith-based perspective, but the mental health has to be there as well. And I think if somebody is at the space right now that they are not allowing the two to merge, they're doing a disservice to the people that are truly in need, right? And you brought up something great, that when we demonize people, let's just pray it out. Let's just pray it out. Man, that's an outdated thought. Why
Mhm.
can't we have prayer in addition to, you know what? I have this wonderful therapist, Dion Brown, that can help you navigate the world of mental health as well. Because again, they just go together. Think about this. And I was riding to church this morning, Dion. I was thinking about this. When we memorize scripture, scripture is affirmation,
Mhm.
right? And when we talk about scripture being affirmation, it's something that if I'm having a challenging mental health day, maybe there's this scripture related to anxiety. Maybe there's this scripture
Mm.
related to depression, right? So that's the faith-based component that helps us out, right? When I listen to praise and worship songs, sometimes I need that, obviously, just to praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but there's a mental health component. It can change my mood. Praise and worship is music. Music is what? Music is one of the easiest foundational coping skills that we give to clients. And so
Absolutely.
they all work together. I mean, they all work together.
We got a few comments here. Brother Lamar Graves said mental health is definitely needed in the realm and sector of faith,
Absolutely, Lamar.
and that some just don't understand how to merge the two. Very, very much so the case. Very, very much so the case. And like we mentioned earlier, that's why we are seeing God raise up people all over, you
Hmm.
know, who are knowledgeable enough and skillful enough to be able to merge the two. Quick story: years ago, when I was functioning as a youth and young adult pastor, there was a young lady who, probably more than a decade ago, there was a young lady who I encountered at a service. I was somewhere visiting, and and I knew some of the people there, and she was exhibiting some erratic behavior. So you saw a bunch of other clergy, you know, around her, praying as they should have been, you know, praying and praying and pleading the blood, and praying and praying and pleading the blood. And the Lord spoke to me and said, "Wait, watch, look, watch, discern." And I did. And I pulled a relative over to the side and started asking questions. You know, does this person have any known mental health issues, or have they been, you know, one of my other licenses is in addictions. Have they been utilizing any recent substances? And the relative said, oh, they used to smoke marijuana, but they told me they stopped, but I think they recently experimented with amphetamines.
Mm.
I was like, So long story short, you know, the praying for this person, a young person, was beneficial. But once they got the young person to the hospital and they were able to drain their system of the drugs that they were taking, they were back to normal.
Hmm.
You know, so clear example, you know, of the importance of integrating the two, you know, whether it's mental health and wellness, or, you know, the other part of people with mental health, that people get affected and impacted by substance use.
Hmm.
You
Yep.
know, substance use, so, you know, the various substance-induced depression, substance-induced psychotic disorders, you name it. So people get affected and impacted by all of that as well.
Hmm. That's a great example, because I remember in my former church home, again, Gillis Memorial, I remember as a young guy seeing people walk in and they would be screaming and they would just have different behaviors. I'm 10, 11, and 12, and I don't understand those behaviors. And looking back years later, my thought was, I wonder if these people were having some kind of issues related to to mental health. And so if you have trained people within the congregation, you know what, they can approach that just as you did. They can approach that situation a little bit differently, as opposed to maybe saying, hey, shut up, and trying to kick the person out of the church, or quickly usher them to the back of the church. And they don't have the skills or the knowledge to understand what that individual is experiencing at the time. Here's something else, Dion, and I literally just thought about this. And this is another lens. Man, I think it's so important that we have this idea of faith and mental health, because if I am in the world of a faith-based world, faith-based perspective, and I also have the mental health training, guess what I can do to individuals? I can use my faith to introduce them, if appropriate, to the world of mental health. If I am a therapist, right? Again, if it's appropriate, and I'm a faith-based therapist, this serves as another opportunity. Guess what? Now, potentially, right? I can use that, and I'm gonna choose my words very carefully, because I don't want anybody to think that, hey, a session with, every therapist, a faith-based therapist, it turns into church. But I think there are sometimes in session, some of the things that we as believers, we can actually meet a client in the space from the mental health world, and we can introduce them to Christ. We can potentially lay the seeds that their relationship with Christ can start. I mean, I've been on sessions, and I used my discernment, and I knew that these clients were believers, and I would ask, man, is it okay if I pray for you?
That's right.
Right? Pray for you and pray with you at that time. That was most appropriate.
Absolutely.
And clients literally got off the session, man, said, and I've never had a therapist be bold enough to do that. And man, I needed that more than I did any mental health modality that you can provide me at the time. So it's just, and again, it's a very delicate mix of how we do that. But I think that's another opportunity that, and I'm sure you've seen this, right? As being a very skillful therapist, man, that we can use the world of therapy for the faith piece, and then the faith piece is mental health as well.
Absolutely. So it begs the question. We've been kind of dancing around it too. The notion of God, in God, and there's the scriptural text in relation to this. A lot of times I'll frame it like this. A lot of times when we go, if you're a Christian and we go to church, or Jewish and you go to a synagogue, or Islamic and you go to a synagogue, a lot of times we're kind of there to tap into our own, our spirituality and our spiritual connectedness. And I had this conversation recently with a brother. God is more concerned about just our spirit man, right? Just our spirituality. So me and the brother were talking about how he's definitely even concerned, he's concerned about us physically. But, the question comes into play is does God actually have concern? Does God have concern about our, it sounds like a funny question, but does God have concern about our mental health?
Unequivocal, yes.
Okay.
Unequivocal, Dion. Yes. Here's why. We are the sons and daughters of God. Why wouldn't he be concerned about the total well-being of his sons and daughters? It's just not the spirit piece, because the spirit piece is not in its totality. That's not just who we are, right? From a holistic perspective, right? There's several different moving parts that all of us have, and the mental health piece is one. So why wouldn't God be concerned about the mental health piece? Because God is concerned about us as an individual, not just a portion of us. So just imagine, again, we're spiritually connected, have a great relationship with God, but we're not in the right place from a mental health perspective. Can that impact our spiritual relationship? Absolutely. So if I am connected from a mental health perspective, I am mentally well, right? And again, that's a relative term, but if I am mentally well, can I be a much better person as it relates to the spiritual piece of me?
My.
So they are connected. Man, think about this. You operate from leadership positions within your church. So imagine you encounter a leader that's spiritually well, but mentally he's not functioning at the level that he could be, because he's not mentally well.
You tapped into something. So one of the services that I went two things. about 3 months ago, I was so graced and honored I was invited to go talk to about 50 senior leaders, pastors of churches. I didn't know hardly any of them, maybe one, but I was invited to come and do a few states over to come and do a mental health and wellness presentation. And
Mm.
I was prepping for that and preparing. And, the Lord really was encouraging me to tell those leaders to make sure that as they all have churches somewhere, to tell them to make sure they invest in their own mental health and wellness, give them a description about what depression and anxiety can do to not just their people, but to them as well.
Mhm.
And before I left, gave them all a complimentary copy of my book, Non-Negotiable Self-Care. If you're listening, go get it from Amazon. And they were, very grateful, convinced at least five of them, to start their therapy journey so that they can manage their own mental health and wellness, because sickness looks dangerous in leadership.
Mm.
I had to say it. Sickness definitely looks dangerous in leadership, because leaders are there to lead other people. In a religious church context, the more well leaders, senior pastors, primary, secondary leaders, associate pastors, ministers, leaders, presidents, directors, the more healthier people, the more healthy people in the congregation. We've got a few comments and concerning, does God care about our mental health? Tia Gaskew said absolutely he does. Yes, he does, Tia.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Elder Tamara Hawkins said yes, he wants us to have peace so we can worship him and serve him freely. And Lamar Graves says, he said in his word, beloved, yep, I love that scripture. I desire that you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. It starts with the soul, being that the soul consists of the mind, will, and emotions. If your soul is sick, if your soul is sick, it's only a matter of time before the rest of you, spirit and body, follows. Sickness starts in the mind. Whew.
Man.
They going in tonight.
Man.
Yeah, it's true.
So, D, I just really quickly to go back to the quote that you said, that sickness in leadership is dangerous. So let's imagine a leader being sick from a mental health perspective, and how that would permeate a congregation. That's really dangerous.
It is.
That's really, really dangerous. And here's another part of that. We talk about this faith and mental health. Man, isn't it so important for leaders, whatever that title may be, whatever that role may be, to understand their own level of self-awareness, to know that, you know what, I'm not as well as I should be at this particular moment. That's really important, because again, if they're not well, everybody else is going to receive that as a byproduct. So if I have an understanding of what mental health looks like from my own perspective, then you know what, maybe I can begin to shift roles and responsibilities to others who are well at the time, if in fact I'm aware of myself and I know that maybe I'm exhibiting some symptoms that is an indication that I'm not mentally well.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I will say sometimes what we see evident happening, with the in the church world gossip mill. Sometimes what we do see happening is with different leaders and some of the things that happen publicly for decades. It probably may have been connected to a lack of a mental health evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yep.
For sure. So okay, so and again, we're much better today. One of the other historical fallacies that I talk about and I've mentioned before, some people even today, some believers struggle with the concept, or even leaders, maybe that, shouldn't I be able to have enough faith to deal with this myself? Shouldn't I have enough faith that whatever's going on in my mind and emotions, I can just go to God to myself? Some people struggle still with the idea of needing to see a therapist or a psychiatrist. One of the services that I just recently added to my website, me being both clinician and clergy, as an associate pastor, I've definitely started getting one church organization contact me, wanted me to basically be in partnership with them and send me, big organization, send me some of their senior pastors and secondary leaders. So one of the things that I put on my website is something called in the spirituality section on my website is something called pastoral pastoral care sessions, and that's generally that's focused on senior leaders and secondary leaders. Because people struggle with, especially leaders, right? Should not have enough leaders and congregants should not have enough faith. Why do I have to see a psychiatrist or a therapist? So that struggle is real.
But even with that being said, that goes back to where we started the beginning of this talk about, right? That, and I like the way that you word this historical fallacy. This is from the beginning of time. So if I'm a pastor, I'm associate pastor. I don't need to go see a psychiatrist or a therapist because I have a relationship with God. And again, this is this idea that, I have to have one and I can't have both. And both of them serve us from a different perspective. It's room for both. It's literally room for both. And it's much needed. It's much needed. And think about this. I think the higher that you go up in, I guess I'll say sort of religious settings in terms of titles and things of that nature, I think you need the mental health piece more.
Yeah.
I think you need it even more because now you're subject to more things, right? You're subject to taking on more challenges and more burdens. And just, again, this, you're associate pastor. Just imagine what it's like to do this thing called life, right? To do it from a pastoral perspective with all these roles and responsibilities, and you're being pulled all of these different ways. And Dion doesn't understand the idea or the concept of self-care. Imagine what that would look like to you if you weren't so intentional about setting aside time for your own self-care. Imagine what that would look like. Imagine as a pastor and you're dealing with grief in the congregation. You're showing up and you are eulogizing people and the toll that it takes on you, but you don't understand that, hey, you know what? Maybe I need somebody else to talk to in human form. Yeah, I got a relationship with God. Just imagine what that looks like. I mean, so I just think it's unavoidable. I think it's unavoidable that we have to have both because I can't imagine what that internal battle would look like having one and not the other.
Yep. We got a few different comments here. While we were talking, it's good stuff. I think I know who this is. Not exactly sure, but Sumner RJ says it's even more dangerous with spirituality finds its way into the sick mind, especially leaders. Truly. Tia Gaskew says, I work in education and bring my faith with me to work. Working in Baltimore City, managing foster care for students, I needed to make my foundation, which includes my mental health and spiritual walk, helps me. I am grateful that I have a therapist that is also faith-based because days can be challenging. I'm sure they are, Tia Gaskew, working in the Baltimore City. And you do need faith for sure.
Yeah.
Got a question directly to me, I think, from Brother Lamar. How do you balance faith and mental health as a pastor and as one who is licensed in the mental health field? Do you have to compartmentalize them both, or is it easy for you to shift between the two? Okay, that's a great question. So that's a loaded question. So let's say individually, with my clients, I have clients who are Christian and clients who are not Christian. I don't advertise myself as a quote unquote Christian therapist. I am a therapist. I am definitely identify as a Christian. And several of my clients do look me up basically because they are Christian and looking for a Christian-based therapist. But I've been trained to be able to integrate spirituality in a general sense, whatever that looks like, with my clients. And utilize spirituality, even if it's different than mine, utilize their spirituality in my work with them individually. However, I do a lot of work, particularly with my Christian clients who also identify with Christianity one-on-one, as well as talking and presentations. Recently, a female Christian client who was going through some intense stuff marriage-wise. We started talking about, to your point, Brother Rashad, earlier, we started talking about the ministry of music, right? And uplifting songs. And she started sharing with me some of the songs in session that help decrease her depression and anxiety when she thinks about the status of her relationship. And I don't do this often, but I said, have you heard My Response by Phil Thompson?
Mm.
And I started playing that part in the session. You have rescued my life, and I'm never going back, and etc. And we had a wonderful, moment in session before she left. So I think for me, I'm pretty comfortable integrating one-on-one if people want that. Sometimes people don't, but also I understand sometimes people have dealt with some traumatic, there's nothing quite like religious trauma, I tell you that. So sometimes people have dealt with religious trauma, so then you got to be careful how you work to integrate that if people want it. So there's no one set answer, but I think I'm pretty discerning now on when and how to integrate that. Sorry for the long answer.
No. I think it was Brother Lamar was a great question. I just want to follow up. I like your answer. One of the things that I kind of say this in a joking manner, but it's a lot of truth in this, is that Rashad is a therapist, but if the door is open, Jesus is going to come in the session and you're going to get some Jesus, right? And I always say that kind of myself in joking, but it's very true. Yeah. When I show up and I hit the Zoom link, I am Rashad Mills, licensed clinical professional counselor. I am not pushing my belief system, my sense of spirituality on anyone. However, if the door is open, then Jesus will come in. And one of the things that I do is, I get a new client, I'm looking at the intake. I am very cognizant of, if the client was a space where do you have any, I think it's like religious belief system that you identify with, something along those lines, kind of the standardized question. And I'm very cognizant to pay attention to that, right? And if a client identifies, yeah, I'm a believer, then it's like, okay, in the back of my mind, it's like, okay, if necessary, and that door opens, okay, Jesus is going to come in. Because again, sometimes people need Jesus and we're not forcing it. But if that space is there, they might need that more than any modality that grad school taught, right? Fact. And so it's just a matter of being aware of what the client, the avenue that they go down, right? Because if a client goes down that avenue, I'm going to drive right along with you, but I'm not going to force it at all.
Yep, absolutely. One of my church members said there's power in music, secular and gospel. True. Very true.
Yeah.
Music. That's funny, right? That's funny on Sunday. But he's right. There is. There is.
It's power. It's power in music.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So just looking at a few of the comments there. Okay, good stuff. One of the things, we have a lot of little statements in our spiritual religious traditions and churches, foundations that we throw around. And one of those is, we say a lot, anyway you bless me, I'll be satisfied. But sometimes sometimes, right, people offer pushback when we talk to them about addressing their mental health. I remember one lady, I was actually preaching a sermon in the church, and I did people who listen to me, I'm an introvert actually by nature and kind of shy, but you know how when the Lord you just have to follow him and do what he tells you to do, you know about that. But people will tell you, those who have heard me teach or preach, I'm going to integrate something in reference to psychology and superheroes. Psychology and superheroes. So I remember I was doing this at a church, and this church I'd been to before, and this lady that was familiar with me, she looked me straight in my face and said, I heard the message and I heard what you said about therapy and a therapist, but God is my counselor. She said, God is my counselor.
What was your response?
I said, oh, okay. All right, then. That's it. I wasn't. No. I'm not. No, that's what. No, that's that. You know what? I let her have that one. I said you can have that one. Because she listened to the message, and the pastor is more understanding of mental health and wellness issues, and he's gonna probably, that particular case, he's gonna probably highly recommend that she, based upon some other factors, that she go to get she see somebody, put it that way. Yeah. So, but we say that, but we offer pushback, but more so, we offer pushback a lot about and we're this is a growing area. I see more and more people coming to therapy, but there's still a lot of pushback concerning medication management, right? Medication management. And the truth of the matter is, just like some people greatly would benefit from medication management to manage their high blood pressure or their diabetes symptoms. Some people would greatly benefit from medication management to handle their anxiety if they have, definitely have the clinical symptoms of generalized anxiety. All of us get anxious over things, but the diagnostic part of meeting the criteria for generalized anxiety or meeting the criteria for clinical depression, when I'm able to talk particularly to my spiritual clients who might, or people I come in contact with might offer some pushback, kind of letting them know about the natural side of taking medicines to treat their physical illnesses as well. So
yeah, that's an interesting thing, and I don't know why and I say we, the people that are in this mental health space, Dion, why we receive pushback.
Wow.
From the medical model, the medical perspective, there isn't as much pushback if I have high blood pressure, if I have diabetes, if I was diagnosed with cancer and the doctor prescribes a medication. Note, there's not a lot of pushback from the medical field.
Yeah.
No, I'm not doing that. I just believe in God. I think it's crazy that the doctor gave me this medicine to reduce my high blood pressure. People will willingly do that. Now, as it relates to psychotropic medication, sometimes it's like a pushback. Nah, I'm not taking those pills. I trust God. Well, yeah, well, we trust God for the medical part of you. When you go to the dentist and they extract a tooth and they give you some medication for that, you willingly do that from your dentist. But from the mental health perspective, it's like, no, I would never go see a psychiatrist, and I'm not taking the Abilify, Lexapro, and it's just so much pushback. And when you said that, it literally sparked this thought in my mind. I wonder why there's so much pushback, and you know why? Because there's stigma. There's not stigma related to a medical perspective or your dentist, or if I was playing ball and I tear my ACL and the doctor gives me some medication post-surgery, I'm willing to do that. But from again, mental health perspective, psychotropic medication, it's the stigma that I don't need these medications, I'm crazy, things of that nature. So I think we're still moving away from the stigma as it relates to mental health and medication, because it's not there when other areas of our lives are present and we need medication. This is a great point.
No, not at all. Not at all. The doctor's like, you need to take this medicine for your high blood pressure, for your diabetes, for your chemo treatment. People are like, okay, sure, without much pushback. But you're right, the stigma, the internalized stigma that some people deal with and struggle with. Oh, I have to take this medicine, or even shame, stigma and shame. Why do I have to take a medicine? Why do I have to take a medicine to be able to think right or to feel a certain way that I want to feel? Why? It's like the why do I need to, I shouldn't have to, right? Those sort of things. And sometimes it's a battle. It's an educational battle to, all ages. I had one client, they were a faith-based family, and I had one client who the male definitely had evidence of clinical depression. And it took about 3 years to convince him to get to the point of taking a medication for his depression.
Was it the shame?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And internalized as a male, right? Why do I have to take this medicine to? But then it's like, okay, well, these symptoms that you're experiencing are causing problem A, B, C, D, and E for you, and getting in the way for you interpersonally, A, B, C, D, and E. So But it took some time. It took some time. So, sometimes it's a matter of being patient with people, educating them and helping them to really understand things. So, uh, those of you that are looking and listening on Instagram, please feel free to add a question or comment, etc. We can see you all that have logged in on Instagram as well. Let's discuss this notion of a critical collaboration. We are living in a time and day and age where, the world is going in all types of directions. I mean, so much is happening and going on. So I think for our spiritual houses and frameworks, there's definitely a need for connection, or in the words of my brother Bishop Guy Robinson, who is the official mental health bishop, literally, for the Full Gospel churches, wrote a book called A Critical Collaboration, right? Yeah. And that's where we are. We're in a place where our pastors, our churches, our religious groups, foundations, our faith systems, there needs to be a critical collaboration with licensed, let me say that again, licensed mental health practitioners. Because you got a lot of self-proclaimed gurus and experts and coaches. Coaches.
Air quotes, right?
A thousand prophets of Baal. Literally. Coaches, right? Not all. So there may be some good ones here and there, right? Some licensed therapists are also coaches. They do both, but critical collaboration, I think there's a time, a need, if churches don't, to connect with one of the comments said living room coaches. So to connect right. But there's a need for churches to connect with licensed therapists and have a network, or directly. Some churches, I know the church that I go to here in Baltimore, the church, Church of the Redeemed of the Lord, my Bishop Jerome Stokes, one of our, either himself or one of our chief associate pastors, in reference to mental health and related situations, issues, conditions, etc., will contact me and do some consultation. They're my home church, so I don't charge them yet, but there's do some consultation with me about kind of how to proceed, whether that's potential mental health and issues in a lay member or leaders. So what do you think? There's a need for that sort of collaboration?
Oh, the need is so great that it can't be understated. And here's why the need is great. And I love the way that you said the bishop worded it, or the title for the book, Critical Collaborations. Think of the physical building of the church as a hospital for the sick, right? It's been referred to that since the beginning of time. So it's a hospital for the sick. So imagine the sick coming to the hospital and they get the faith-based, the spirit part, but there's no resources for the other challenge that they may be having, right? And if we can't refer out, hey, you know what? I have a wonderful clinician that I can refer you to. Doesn't have to be a member of that particular church, but have a ready list, a resource, whether it's a website or whatever that looks like. I mean, if it's old school churches, right, a pamphlet, whatever that looks like, that there's resources, right? Or maybe someone within the church who can do these consultations and then make the most appropriate referral. So I have this person in here and I'm working on the spirit part of them, but I can't refer them anywhere else, right? And then what happens at that point, now from this person's perspective, the church really isn't helping as much. And now this person may not find themselves as spiritually connected. Why? Because they feel like that they have been left hanging from the mental health perspective. And let's call it what it is. A lot of people from the faith-based perspective, if that church, that whatever it is, right? Whatever that religious, I guess, organization can't help the person in all aspects of their life, they feel like that they've let them down. And for years, a lot of religious organizations, they haven't had the connectedness to collaborate with somebody else. And this person leaves out of a church, a mosque, a synagogue, and they leave what? They leave feeling unfulfilled because there's no mental health component that they can connect them to. So I think it's really critical. It really is critical that we have, if nothing else, resources.
Yeah. Oh, I think to your point, bare minimum, definitely have to have at least some resources to direct people to. I'm gonna kind of combine a few thoughts here. So let me just make sure I get this straight. So it is possible, I guess, right? It's possible for people to suffer from depression as well as anxiety and still have faith in God.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know how it's possible? You know how it's possible, Dion? You're speaking to one of them. You're speaking to one of them. I've been through the phases where I've been depressed. I battle anxiety every day,
Yeah.
but I have an incredible amount of faith in God. And it's a combination of the two. It's the fact that I have a therapist, that the therapist can give me the clinical piece. And then I have a wonderful pastor. I have my own relationship with Christ. And I have this thing called the Bible right, that I can go into, and it helps me to reaffirm what I already know. There's times that us as believers, we can drift off. We can drift off from the spirit part of us, and we need that sort of that clinical piece, right? And sometimes there's times that we can drift off from the clinical side, and we need the what? We need the spiritual piece, right? Again, this combination of the two. So I think, yeah, it's absolutely. And don't get it twisted. A lot of people that we walk past in our very own churches, I'm sure that they're suffering from different things.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure, right? And again, if they don't have a therapist, right, at that point, the church is what they need at that moment, because they may not be connected with the clinical piece, right? And sometimes, hey, having a great session with your therapist, man, it might be better than a church service at that moment. Again, and it's this great.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, you're right. Look,
Trayvon
Johnson said he said it's two things. He said it's very possible and common for many. Yes.
Absolutely. Good. Great point, Trayvon. Absolutely. Again, it's so many people that we walk past, that I walk past this Sunday morning service. And if I peeled back the layers, right, I see the spirit part of them loving and praising and worshiping our God, but they may have, they may be clinically diagnosed with something. And again, it's this great balancing act. It's a great balancing act.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I was giving one talk, speaking event one time concerning, my website, let's go here to banners. There we go. This is my website for everybody that's listening and paying attention. I really haven't advertised it much just yet, but my website is really new and updated. So one of the things I have on there is a speaker signature sheet, which I have about 12 of my signature talks and presentations. There is a spirituality section, which talks about weekend clinics that I offer for churches that's geared toward, and I'll mention this at the end, that's geared toward men, youth, and church leaders, where churches would have me come in to speak for their event and do a psychological, theological integrated workshop at some point as well. And one of the things that I mentioned in one of my talks a little while back was the notion of you can have a great church healing and deliverance service as well as a great therapy session.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't have to cancel each other out.
Yeah.
Oh wow, good. That's awesome. Look, brother Trayvon said, gonna finish watching tomorrow at the terminal and flying home. Appreciate you both. Well, thank you for tuning in while you're in flight. That's wonderful.
Appreciate you, good brother Trayvon.
Absolutely, for sure. Brother Lamar said, let's go here. Is it possible for, oh my Lord, is it possible for depression and anxiety to be demonic, or more so, does depression and anxiety derive ultimately from a spiritual diagnosis? I've heard for okay, I've heard for years depression is a spirit. Just inquiring your thoughts. You want to start, or you want me?
I'm going to start. This is a great question. I'm
Yeah.
going to start from a biblical based perspective, right? So I'm thinking of the demon possessed man, right? So we read about this in the Bible. It's a demon possessed man, and we think about depression, anxiety. Is it possible for that to be demonic? I think that it can,
Mhm.
right? And I think that we would have to. Again, I'm a flip flop between the spiritual and then the mental health piece. I think clinically we would need to look at some different factors to see the onset of it, right? How did these situations come on, depression and anxiety? Can it be demonic in nature? I think it can be. Now, the second part of this, or more so, does depression and anxiety derive ultimately from a spiritual diagnosis? Depression can be a spirit, but that doesn't limit the fact that it's just spiritual in nature. And I'll say it that way and then kind of turn over to you.
Okay, absolutely. So that's also a very good question. Again, when I'm talking to people, particularly groups and audiences, etc. Um, briefly, yes, this is the type of situation where it does require, someone who's knowledgeable and trained in kind of both capacities in both worlds.
Yep.
The Bible does talk about the spirit of heaviness, right? First of all, there's no spirit. Let me thank you. Let me get in trouble. There's no such thing as the spirit of depression. Let me just say that. There's nowhere in the Bible the words spirit of depression. We do have a habit in our traditions of calling any and everything, creating any and everything, the spirit of. There is a spirit, it's called the spirit of heaviness, and it's the demonic strong man. And that spirit of heaviness, that from a spiritual standpoint, there can be a spirit of heaviness that can bring about some similar symptoms of a depressive nature. Generally, if so, for born again, let's say this, and this is how I explain it in a Christian framework. For born again believer that believes the Bible, he or she can have a clinical diagnosis of clinical depression, where they may have, crying spells, be isolative, withdrawn, hopeless, helpless, feeling worthless, feelings of guilt, unnecessary shame, may not want to live. In addition, because they are a believer, in addition, they could also, from a spiritual battle, spiritual warfare capability, they could also be under attack, impact, and influence by the spirit of heaviness,
Mm,
which the Bible does mention by name, the spirit of heaviness. I don't have the exact text in front of me right now, but the spirit of heaviness is Old Testament mentioned. And so, what has to happen for that born again believer? Therapy, possible medication management, and spiritual warfare tools and techniques. So, it has to get addressed
mm,
components, from all components. So, yes, a born again believer can have clinical depression. Doesn't mean anything wrong with you. Doesn't mean you lack faith. It's just like a born again believer can have, and we have plenty of people who do have high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, heart conditions, no different, and be also under attack from a demonic spirit, because that is in line with the belief system, the culture, and the tradition.
mm. Well said. Well said.
To God be the glory.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Look,
this is good.
Lamar's asking some great questions, man.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, he always is. I told him he'd be taking us to the fifth level for sure. It's good, good stuff though. Thank you. He said good stuff too. Yeah, it is. It's really good, and this is why we have to have these type of talks and discussions, because this is some important stuff. Okay, so time is about to escape us, which is okay. So let's see. So I will let me make a statement. I think our churches overall have done better in a lot of churches are doing better with understanding, recognizing, implementing mental health and wellness. Many churches are now starting to have mental health awareness days, panels, functions, events, speakers. We still have a ways to go. We still have a ways to go, but I think it's I think it's doing better. One of the 3 minutes. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to mention that we probably need to work on this. There's this notion of spiritual bypassing, right? Spiritual bypassing. And spiritual bypassing really has to do with like putting a spiritual band-aid on something or just throwing a scripture over something instead of really addressing the real issue. We see it a lot, for example, with grief. Sometimes people tell people unfortunately, sometimes people tell people to not grieve, to, the Lord is, the person is saved, they're with the Lord, they went home to be with the Lord. No. Let's do that. But first, we want people to deal with their natural feelings and emotions of sadness, of loss, of grief. Because to step over that, we go over that bypass, right? There's a bypassing. So we want to not give in to spiritual bypassing. So we got a few people. I love these conversations. And Corey Harris said, great conversation today. So good stuff, really good stuff. So
Stuff. Really good stuff.
absolutely. The audience you all were really chimed in. I see a number of people across all of the platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram are all still actively working. And, you see a number of people who are looking and chiming in. I'm going to ask you all to please like and share, whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. You can go back to it. Look at it on Facebook under Dion Brown, as well as you can share or review or tell others about it on YouTube under DMV Therapist. So, Mr. Rashad.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to, as we begin to close, thank you, Elder Tamar Hawkins, and very good discussion. Thank you. As we begin to close, I'm going to ask for you to share with our listening audience any closing thoughts, as well as ways that they can connect with you, anything you have coming up or going on that you want people to know, or ways to, follow you or connect with you, or any projects, etc.
Absolutely. So people can, first and foremost, thank you again, Dion, for this great opportunity. I really love to talk about faith and mental health, two of my favorite things in the world to talk about. And if you're around me long enough, I'm going to be talking about one, or if not both. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity. So people can follow me. I'm on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Rashad Bowtie Mills, Rashad Bowtie Mills, and TikTok as well. Just started gravitating toward that platform every day, releasing motivational messages, things to uplift and encourage and inspire people. And I guess if I would leave the audience with anything, it would be very simple in nature, that God is concerned about the total person. God is concerned about the total person, and that includes your mental health. I'll be very short and succinct.
All right, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. It has been a pleasure you joining us tonight to talk about this very important subject, very important topic. So we want to also thank our listening audience on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. You can follow me, Instagram, the selfcare_therapist. You can click on my link tree and get access to my website, my book, my self-care book, Non-Negotiable Self-Care. You can also see my apparel line, which is a bunch of 4 designs for self-care. Those of you that would like to sow a financial seed, I'll use church words, you can do that. Here is our Cash App, and this is our Venmo. If you want to support us as we work to integrate mental health and wellness, this has been a very powerful, profound, interactive segment tonight. So much so that you all barely let us get through several of our questions, but it's okay. It went the full direction that it was supposed to be. And so we just want to encourage you all to again to like and share. We are found doing this every first Sunday at 6 p.m. Broadcast an integrated approach where we integrate various subjects in relation to mental health and spirituality, and bringing on various guests once a month. And it will stream live on Facebook under Dion Brown, YouTube under DMV Therapist, and on our Instagram page, the self-care_therapist. So with that being said, we want to say goodnight to all of our listeners as we prepare to end yet another segment of an integrated approach. You can join us next month, first Sunday at 6 p.m. All right. Take care.